In this lesson, we're going to expand upon our last lesson just a little bit by adding a user management screen that will allow us to alter the role of any user and delete users as well. So let's go ahead and dive in and get the view set up for this first. So let's jump into our terminal and do node ace make controller, and we'll call this users. And then let's also do node ace make view, and let's put this inside of a users directory, but call the actual file manage. Next, let's dive into that controller. So let's jump into our code base, go to users controller, uncomment the HTTP context, and let's do public async manage. We should just need view out of this. Grab our HTTP context contract for that. And first, let's go ahead and grab all of our users. So let's do const users equals await user query, and let's order them by their email. Now we could also do pagination here, but we will have a specific lesson on pagination coming up, so we'll skip over that for right now. And let's also grab our roles as well. So let's do const roles equals await role query, and let's order those by their name. Lastly, let's return that to our view. So view render users / manage and provided the users and the roles. Give that a save. Now we can jump into our role page. So let's go users manage. And let's actually set up a layout for these two views. So let's copy what we have within our welcome page. Under views, let's do new file, call a directory layouts, and then we'll just do app.edge within that layouts directory. Let's paste all of our welcome page in and then get rid of everything inside of main. Then inside of main, let's do section content. Next, let's jump back into our welcome page and let's actually rig that up. So grab everything inside of main, cut that out, and then get rid of everything inside of the file. And then we can do at layout is layouts / app at section is content, and then let's end our section, pasting our contents of main back inside of here. Give that a save. We can boot our server up real quick just to make sure that everything went okay with that. Jump back into the browser and refresh. Okay, looks like that went okay. Now let's do the same for manage. So at layout is layouts, app at section is content, and then at end our section. Inside of our section, I'll put an extra div here, and then we'll do an H1 specifying that this is our user management screen. Then we'll want a table with a T head and a table row. And then our TH for the first column will be our email. Our second TH will be the user's role. Third will be when they joined. And then lastly, we will have an actions column. Then we could do a T body, and let's loop over each of our users. So each user in users at end each. We'll do a table row for each one of our users. TD, the first one will be our user.email. Second, for right now, let's just print out their role ID. So role ID. Third, user.createdAt.to locale string. And then lastly, we will put a to-do on our actions, and we'll rig that up to delete here in a bit. Let's actually jump back into our welcome page and add a link for this as well. So we'll ultimately want this to be restricted to administrators. So within our isAdmin check, we can put the link inside of there. So let's do a href route, and we need to actually create this route, but it will be users.manage, and we can call this manage users. All right, let's go ahead and create that route as well. So route.get users / manage users controller.manage as users.manage. Actually, let's put this inside of a group. So route.group.prefix users as users, and then get rid of that users prefix there and here. Okay, good. So now we should be able to jump back into our browser, give it a refresh. Let's log in with an administrator. So that should be test plus admin. All right, cool. There we go. And here we have manage users and log out. Let's actually wrap that inside of a separate div so that everything flows. So let's wrap this section here inside of a div and each one of these as well. There we go. That's a little bit better. All right, now let's jump into our manage user screen, and we can see our user management with our table of 4 users. I did go ahead and register 2 extra users here so that we can test our deletion. And we can see at the present moment, we only have 1 user with a role ID of 2, so only 1 administrator. So next, let's go ahead and rig up our role column here to a select. And then anytime that select box changes, we want to persist the user's role change. So let's jump back into that page. And for our role column here, we can get rid of everything that we have so far. And let's put this inside of a form. The action here we will create in a second. Method for that will be post. And then all that we need inside of this form is a single select, name of role ID. And then we'll want to loop over each of our roles. So at each role in roles. And then we'll want to put our option with the value of that role ID. And then the contents will be the role.name. And then we also want to add an additional check here. So if the role.id equals the user.roleID, then we want to mark this as selected. Otherwise, we can just put an empty string there. So let's give that a save, jump back into our browser, and we should now see a select box. Looks like they are all defined. Oh, you know what we forgot to do in our last lesson was actually rig up the name column to our role. So let's do column public name string. For some reason, I completely forgot about everything inside of the models last lesson, but we did actually circle back and fill out our user. I just forgot that role name needed to be created there as well. So now that we have that saved, let's jump back into our browser, refresh, and there we go. So now we see our actual role names with user, user, admin, and user. So next, whenever we actually change a role for a user, we want that to persist. So right now, if I refresh, that's just going to reset back to user. So let's jump back into our code base and take the care of that. Let's go ahead and just do an inline on change equals this dot parent element dot submit. I know some people don't like putting their event handlers directly on as attributes, but if we imported Alpine, it would look pretty much the same. So we're just going to move forward with that for right now. And then we need to set up our forms action so that that actually has something to submit to. So let's jump back into our users controller and let's do public. Now you can call this something like change roles, role change. I'm just going to call it role. We'll want our request, response, and params. And we're also going to want to import the validator. So let's import schema and rules from @IOC Adonis or validator. For this validator, we will do const role schema equals schema.create. Role ID is schema.number. And then we'll do rules.exists so that we can check whether or not the role ID provided actually exists within our database. Table roles column of ID. That should be all that we need for our schema. We'll grab the actual user's ID off of the params. So then we can do const user equals await user dot find or fail, and then just provide it the params dot ID. Oh, we also want to validate our data. So data equals await request validate. Schema is role schema. And then we could do await user dot merge data and save. Lastly, let's return response dot redirect and redirect them directly back to the form. Give that a save and let's rig that up to a route. So routes inside of our group here, let's do route dot, and we'll set this up as a patch, and we'll want this to have a param of ID, and then we'll suffix it with /role. And then this will be users controller dot role as role. And then we need to rig it up to our form. So jump back into manage for our action. Let's do route users dot role, and then the ID will be user dot ID. Then we also need to specify that the query string underscore method should be patch. And then lastly, let's go enable method spoofing. So let's jump into our app.ts. Right here where we have allow method spoofing, change that from false to true. And we should be good to test this out. So let's jump back into our browser, give this a refresh to pick up those changes. And let's change butters here from user to admin. All right, we did see that that did do a soft refresh on us, and it is still admin. Let's give it a hard refresh just to test it out. And it is still admin. We can jump into our actual database here, give that a refresh and test that out. And you can see Butters is indeed a role ID of 2. So he is officially an admin. We can test it again by changing him back to a user, refresh once more, and he's back to 1. So that is working a-okay. Now, before we go any further, we want to restrict this page and that action to administrators only. It doesn't make sense to allow just any old user to pop in this page, see all of our users, and be able to change all of their roles. So we'll want to create a middleware for that action. Now, if you're using Bouncer, that would be a perfectly valid solution, but I think we can do this one check within a single middleware. So let's go ahead and stop our server and let's do node ace make middleware, and let's call this role. So we're not going to call this admin or user. We'll just call this role, and then we'll be able to provide a role into this middleware so that we can check against it to see whether or not our user has it to allow or disallow the particular action. So let's go ahead and register that role real quick. So let's jump down to our kernel. Underneath auth here, let's do role and import app middleware and role. Give that a save, and then let's jump into our role middleware. And we'll want to accept in the particular roles that we want to allow into this middleware check as the third argument. We can call this guards, and this will come through as a string array. And so the guards that we'll want to provide here will look something like this. So we'll have dot middleware to actually apply in the middleware, probably have auth prior to it, and then we would have our role middleware, which is this one here, colon, and then a list of any roles that we want to allow into this particular route. So we would want admin for this one. And say in the future we were to add a moderator role, we could allow them in here by doing a comma delimited list and just adding them in there like that. So this is on the route registration. This is what it would look like. So what we need to do here is change our guards string array from a string array of admin, moderator, or whatever into a list of IDs for those roles that they represent. So we can do const role IDs equals, then we can loop over our guards as guard, import our roles enum, and then try to find that guard key. And we also want to make this to uppercase so that it changes from lowercase admin to the uppercase admin that would match our role key. And then let's also grab our response and auth out of our HTTP context. If not, our role IDs includes our auth user role ID. Then we want to stop this request for the user and kick them out. Now you can either redirect them to a page that they're allowed at and give them some session message, or you can just end the request with an error. So let's return response dot, and let's do unauthorized here to just kick them out with an error. And we can say this is restricted to guards.join, make that a common delimited list there. Oop, that should have an S on it. There we go, users. So whenever we restrict our route to a role of just admins, if the user is not an administrator, this will kick them out with an unauthorized error. Otherwise, if they are an admin, they will bypass that if statement and go directly to next, allowing them into the request handler. So this should be all that we need to do here. Let's give that a save, jump back into our routes and rig that up to our user group. So we can do middleware, provided auth first, and then role, and specify that we only want to allow admins. Give that a save. And let's change one more thing. So within our users controller, if a currently authenticated administrator demotes themselves to a user, we don't want to just redirect them back, because now since this page is restricted to just administrators, whenever we actually try to redirect them back, since they're no longer an admin, they would just be reached with an error. So let's go ahead and change this. So let's grab our auth off of our HTTP contract as well. All right, and let's do const is auth user equals user.id equals our auth.user ID. And then we can do a ternary check here, is auth user and user.role ID does not equal roles.admin. Otherwise, we can redirect them back. So here we would want to do response, redirect, and then to, and we'll just do path and point them back to the home page. So if the auth user is changing their role and that role is not to an admin, which in this current point in time would be true for anything since we only have 2 roles, then we would want to kick them back to the home page. Otherwise, we're okay to just return them back. So let's give this a save, jump back into our terminal, boot back up our server, and then let's jump back into our browser, give that a refresh, and let's try changing a role that is not our currently authenticated user first. So let's change apples to admin. Okay, good. So we got redirected back to this page just like we should have been. And now let's change our test admin from an admin to a user. And there we go, we got redirected back to the home page, preventing an error for us. And you can note that we also do not see manage users as a link here either. Let's try to manually go into that page now. So let's go users, manage, and we are greeted by an error. So this is being successfully restricted to just administrators. Let's log out and let's log in as our admin. So that I think that's apples@test.com. Okay, and let's manage our users again and give test admin administrator capabilities once more. There we go. And next, let's go ahead and register up the deletion. So within our manage page, we will want to take out this to do, replace this with a form action, which we will again fill out here in a second, method of post. And instead of a select or anything in here, all that we want is a button type equals, and let's actually set this to a button. Inside of here, let's just put delete. And then similar to our previous one, we're just going to do an inline event handler here. And instead of just directly submitting, which is why we've set this to a button, let's actually do on click equals, and let's provide a confirm, and let's say, are you sure you want to delete this user? And then if that comes back truthy, we can do and this dot parent element dot submit. So if the user confirms that they want to delete the user, then this will come back truthy, and we'll move on to our and check, which would be our submission of our form. Otherwise, if this comes back falsy, the and check would be just bypassed, so this will never run. And let's next go ahead and set up that route handler. So inside of our users controller, public async destroy, we'll want our response, params, and auth out of here as well. So let's grab our user first. So const user equals await, user.find or fail, params.id. Let's do our is auth user check again. So is auth user equals user.id, auth user ID. And then we can do await user.delete, and then return is auth user. And we don't need to do any additional check here. So if it's the auth user deleting themselves, then we just want to return them back to the home page. So response redirect to path home. Otherwise, we can just return them back. So response dot redirect back. And that should be all that we need to do there. Since we don't have any additional relationships bound off of our user, we don't need to worry about deleting those out prior to our user's deletion. So at this point, it should be pretty simplistic just as we have it. Let's go ahead and rig up that route. So routes, route.delete, ID, and then users controller.destroy as destroy. Give that a save, and let's go rig that up to our form. So action route users.destroy, provided the ID of user.id. And then our query string of underscore method is delete. And you can put these different method spoofing forms into actual Edge components. We have a lesson on that specifically if you are interested in learning about that approach, but for right now, we will just leave this as is. And let's go ahead and give this a test. So let's jump back into our browser, give this a refresh, and we should now see delete buttons, which we do. Now we're logged in as Apple, so let's not delete him quite yet, and let's actually try to delete Butters instead. So let's click on delete. We are greeted with our "Are you sure you want to delete this user" message. Let's first try cancel to make sure that that works okay. Refresh to make sure Butters is still there, and he is. So let's try deleting again, click OK, and by goes Butters. Now we can try that again with Apples, which we are logged in as. Actually, we can do one more thing here before we delete out our auth user of Apples. Let's jump back into our page, and where we have user email, let's do an additional check here. So let's plop this down onto its own line, and let's do if user.id equals auth user ID, and then we can put in parentheses you. So we can specify that this is the authenticated user by telling them this is you. And there we go. So you can see Apples has you. So now we can tell that this is us, and we can try to delete, hit OK, and we are redirected back to the login or the home page just fine. So that's working A-OK. So that gives you an idea on how to start out a user management screen. It's at its very simplistic state at this point in time, but we'll expand upon this further in later lessons. Particularly next, we'll go in and add user blocking so that we can restrict users from being able to log in or access our application.